The space station orbited the distant planet, shining like a star in the cold expanse of space. It was a hub for many species across the galaxy, a place where diplomats, scientists, and leaders gathered to discuss matters of great importance. Humans, along with various alien civilizations, had come together for a grand summit that would shape the future of the galaxy. The station was bustling with activity, filled with voices from every corner of the universe, each speaking a different language and carrying with them a different culture. Among the many species present was a young alien princess from the planet Elvenar. She was a member of an advanced species known for their grace, intelligence, and physical strength. Her name, though not yet revealed to the human, was whispered across the halls in awe. She was not just royalty. She was an icon of intellect and power among her people. However, for all her status, she had one weakness, a deep curiosity about humans, and she had always wondered what made them so different from the rest of the species in the galaxy. It was during one of the evening's diplomatic gatherings that the human scientist, Dr. John Harper, found himself summoned to meet with the princess. He was a biologist, a researcher who had spent years studying human biology. His work had never been particularly famous, but it had garnered interest from other species, especially the Elvenar, who had been fascinated by the strange and unique ways in which human biology operated. When Dr. Harper entered the designated meeting room, he was surprised to find it almost empty except for the princess, who stood by a large window, staring out into the vastness of space. Her long, shimmering silver hair fell gracefully over her shoulders, and her eyes, though alien, were filled with an almost human-like curiosity. Her posture was regal, yet there was something soft in the way she looked at him, as though she was both powerful and vulnerable at the same time. "Dr. Harper," she greeted him, her voice smooth and melodic. "Thank you for coming. I have a question that I believe only you can answer." He nodded, unsure of what to expect. "Of course, Princess. I'm happy to help. Tell me about your biology," she said simply, turning to face him. "How does your species reproduce?" The question was simple enough, but there was a hint of something more behind it. A curiosity that could not be easily satisfied with a basic answer. Dr. Harper blinked in surprise. He had been asked questions before about human biology, but never in such a direct and open manner, especially not by someone of her stature. "Well," Dr. Harper began, trying to gather his thoughts, "humans reproduce sexually. A male and a female come together, and through a process of fertilization, a new life is created. It's a natural part of our existence, just like it is for most species. But there's more to it than just biology. Humans experience emotions tied to reproduction, love, attraction, and a whole range of feelings that come into play." The princess listened carefully, her expression thoughtful. "Emotions?" she asked, as if she had never considered this aspect before. "Yes," Dr. Harper explained. "For humans, emotions are deeply connected to our biology. Attraction, love, and even family dynamics all play a role in how we reproduce. It's not just a biological act, it's a connection between two people, between families, and even between entire communities." The princess was silent for a moment, clearly processing this new information. "How can that be?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "In my species, reproduction is a purely biological event. There is no love, no emotional bond between the individuals involved. It is simply a matter of necessity. So I ask again, how does your species handle this connection? What is it that makes humans so different?" Dr. Harper paused, trying to put into words something so deep and fundamental to human nature. He had never been asked to explain it so plainly before. He was a scientist, not a philosopher, but he understood the question was not about biology alone. It was about the soul of humanity, something that could not easily be explained in terms of science. "It's hard to put into words," he said after a long pause. "But for humans, reproduction is not just about creating life. It's about connection, creating bonds that last beyond just the biological act. It's about building relationships, families, and communities. There's a deep emotional aspect to it that shapes who we are as a species. The princess looked at him with a mixture of fascination and confusion. And these bonds, do they make you stronger? Do they help your people survive? Yes, Dr. Harper said, nodding. Emotional connections give us strength, resilience. They motivate us to protect each other, to work together. We help one another in ways that go beyond survival. It's why humanity has thrived despite the odds. The princess looked out of the window again, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond. There was a deep silence between them, as though the weight of the conversation had shifted something in the air. She had asked a simple question, but the answer had opened her eyes to something she had never considered before, an entirely new perspective on life, one that was far more complex and emotionally driven than she could have imagined. "I have never understood your kind," she said quietly, her voice filled with awe. "But now, I believe I am beginning to see. There is more to you than I could ever have imagined." Dr. Harper smiled softly, not sure whether to feel proud or just humbled by her words. He had merely answered a question, but the princess's response suggested that he had revealed something far more profound than he had intended. And so the conversation continued, with the princess asking more questions, each one peeling back another layer of humanity that she had never before considered. And as they spoke, Dr. Harper began to wonder if this meeting was more than just a scientific inquiry. It felt like the beginning of something much larger, a bridge between two very different worlds. The princess leaned back in her chair, her eyes locked on Dr. Harper as she processed everything he had told her. She had been listening intently, absorbing each word as though it held the key to understanding an entire species. But there was more to her questions, more that she needed to know. "You speak of these bonds, these emotional connections," she said slowly, her voice carrying the hint of wonder. "But how do these connections manifest? What happens when a human experiences love, or attraction?" Dr. Harper was taken aback by the question. He had never considered explaining something so personal to an alien, especially not one who seemed so different from humans in terms of biology and emotional understanding. But here he was, being asked to explain the very heart of human experience. "Well, when humans experience love or attraction, it's not just a feeling," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It affects our entire being, our thoughts, our actions, even our bodies. It makes us care for each other, work together, and protect those we care about. It's like an invisible bond that ties people together, even when they're far apart." The princess nodded thoughtfully. "And this bond, does it affect your physical capabilities? Does it make you stronger, more resilient?" Dr. Harper hesitated. "In some ways, yes. The emotional connections humans form can inspire incredible acts of courage, kindness, and sacrifice. People often do extraordinary things for those they love or care about. It's a driving force in our lives, in everything we do." The princess seemed deep in thought, her gaze distant as she mulled over his words. She had never considered how emotions might influence strength, both physical and mental. In her society, emotions were seen as weaknesses, something to be controlled, not embraced. And yet here was this human, telling her that emotions were what made humanity truly strong. "But how do humans deal with conflict?" the princess asked, her voice curious. "If emotions can make you strong, can they also make you weak? Can they cloud your judgment?" Dr. Harper nodded slowly, understanding her concern. "Yes, emotions can cloud judgment at times. They can make people act impulsively or irrationally, but they can also bring clarity, a sense of purpose. Humans fight for what they love, and they fight for what they believe is right. It's complicated, but it's part of what makes us human." The princess sat in silence for a moment, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest of her chair. The silence stretched between them, thick with contemplation. She had never known a species that seemed so driven by emotion, so deeply connected to each other and their world. It was a concept that was both fascinating and troubling. What happens when these emotional bonds are broken? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What happens when a human loses someone they love? Dr. Harper felt a twinge in his chest at the question. It was a painful one, and one that every human could relate to. When someone loses a loved one, it's devastating. It can break people, make them question everything. But over time, humans learn to heal. They find new connections, new reasons to keep going. Loss is hard, but it teaches us to cherish the time we have and the people we care about. The princess looked at him with a new understanding, as though the weight of his words had finally sunk in. It sounds painful, she said quietly, her eyes filled with sympathy. But it also sounds beautiful. You humans are so fragile, yet so resilient. Dr. Harper smiled gently. That's what makes us human. We're not perfect. We make mistakes, we get hurt, but we keep going. We learn from our pain, and we grow. The princess's expression softened as she considered his words. She had always believed that her people were the pinnacle of strength, biologically superior, capable of surviving without the need for emotional connections. But now, she was starting to see things differently. Perhaps there was something to be learned from humanity's vulnerability, something that could strengthen her people in ways they had never imagined. Do you think it's possible for my people to feel what you feel? She asked, her voice tinged with both hope and doubt. Could we learn to form these bonds, to understand what it means to love and care for each other in the way you do? Dr. Harper paused, searching for the right words. I don't know. It's not something that can be taught overnight. Emotions are complex, deeply rooted in our biology and our experiences. But if your people are open to it, willing to learn and embrace vulnerability, maybe they could understand it. The princess stared at him for a long time, her mind racing with possibilities. She had spent her entire life studying the physical, scientific aspects of life, convinced that emotions were a weakness. But now she found herself questioning everything she had ever known. We have advanced technology. We have strength. We have everything we need to survive, she said softly. But we lack the one thing that seems to make your species so unique, the ability to truly connect with others. I want to understand that. I want to know what it's like to experience love, to form bonds that go beyond necessity. Dr. Harper could see the determination in her eyes. He knew this conversation was far from over. The princess had asked questions that would change the course of both their lives, and possibly the future of their species. I think you can learn, he said gently, meeting her gaze. But it will take time, and it will take an open heart. It's not something that can be forced or replicated with technology. It's something that has to come from within. The princess nodded, a new resolve in her eyes. Then I will learn, and I will help my people understand. As the meeting came to a close, Dr. Harper couldn't help but feel that this was the beginning of something much larger than either of them had anticipated. A journey that would not only change the princess, but might also change the very fabric of her society. The days that followed Dr. Harper's conversation with the princess were filled with strange new developments. She seemed more determined than ever, her curiosity about human emotions growing each day. The meetings between them became more frequent as the princess asked question after question, each more personal than the last. Her fascination with human biology and the deep emotional connections that came with it had taken root in a way neither of them had expected. However, it wasn't just simple curiosity that drove her anymore. There was something else in her eyes now, something deeper, more thoughtful, as though she was seeking something more than just knowledge. Dr. Harper began to wonder if this pursuit of understanding was not just a scientific endeavor, but something more profound. One evening, as they sat in the quiet of the meeting room, the princess leaned forward, her expression serious. Dr. Harper, she began, her voice carrying a weight he hadn't heard before. There is something I must confess. The human scientist raised an eyebrow, sensing the shift in the conversation. What is it, princess? She hesitated, her fingers gently tapping on the table as if weighing her words carefully. You have spoken of love, of emotional connections that bind your species together. And yet, I find myself asking, how could something as powerful as love be so natural to you? We, the Elvenar, have never experienced such bonds. For us, emotions have always been secondary to our strength. We have evolved in a way that made us see our connections as unnecessary distractions. Dr. Harper studied her closely. Her admission wasn't just an intellectual curiosity. It seemed like she was searching for something beyond understanding biology, perhaps understanding herself. I know what you are thinking, she continued, her eyes now focused on the distant stars outside the window. You think our species is incapable of love, incapable of forming bonds the way humans do. And maybe you're right. But I wonder, Dr. Harper, what would happen if we learned to embrace what you call emotions? What if my people could learn what it means to love, to care for one another deeply? Her words lingered in the room, and Dr. Harper's mind raced. This was more than a scientific question now. It was a plea, a desire for change. The princess wasn't asking about biology anymore. She was asking about the future of her people. He sat back, his thoughts shifting. You're not just asking about biology anymore, are you? He asked gently. This isn't just about understanding human emotions, is it? You're asking if your species can change, if you can evolve in a way that embraces emotions the way we do. The princess nodded, her expression softening. Yes, I am. I have come to realize that perhaps this is the missing link for us. Perhaps it is not enough to just be strong, to just survive. Perhaps we need to feel, truly feel, in order to thrive. For a moment, the room fell silent. Dr. Harper understood. She wasn't just a princess seeking knowledge. She was a leader, searching for a way to bring her people into a new age, one that would embrace the emotional richness of human experience. But it wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't something that could be taught in a few weeks or even months. The princess was asking him for something that might take years, or even generations, to achieve. Do you think it's possible? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Could we really learn to feel as your species does? Could we truly understand the power of love, empathy, and connection? Dr. Harper paused, searching for the right words. He could see the weight of her request, the earnestness in her eyes. He had never imagined that something as simple as explaining human emotions could become so complex, so important. But he knew one thing. If there was anyone who could guide her people through this transformation, it would be her. I think it's possible, he said at last. But it won't be easy. Emotions aren't just something you can learn in a classroom or by reading a book. They have to be experienced, felt, and your people will need to be open to them. It will take time, and it will take effort. But if you're willing to try, I believe your species can change. You can learn to embrace emotions, just like we have. The princess listened carefully, her brow furrowed in thought. And how do we begin? She asked. Dr. Harper took a deep breath. It starts with understanding. You have to let go of the idea that emotions are weaknesses. You need to see them as strengths, just as important as your physical capabilities. Start small. Take time to learn about human relationships, about what it means to truly care for someone. And most importantly, learn to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a key part of human emotion. It's about allowing yourself to trust, to feel, and to connect on a deeper level. The princess absorbed his words, her gaze now steady and determined. I will start with that. I will begin by understanding this vulnerability, by learning what it means to trust. But I will need your help, Dr. Harper. I will need you to teach me, guide me through this process. He nodded. I'll help you. But remember, change takes time. Your people may resist at first. But if they see the benefits of forming real emotional bonds, they will understand. They will come to see that true strength comes from unity, from connection, not just from physical power. The princess stood up, her posture regal as always, but there was something different in the way she held herself now. It wasn't just the weight of leadership, It was the weight of possibility. "Thank you, Dr. Harper," she said, her voice steady. "You have given me hope, and I will not stop until I bring this hope to my people." As Dr. Harper watched her leave, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He had come to teach a simple biological lesson. Now he found himself part of something much larger, helping an entire species learn to embrace the very essence of what it meant to be human. The days that followed Dr. Harper's conversation with the princess were filled with quiet anticipation. The princess, determined to understand the emotional fabric of humanity, began her new journey of discovery. She spent more time with Dr. Harper, asking questions, observing human behavior, and trying to understand what made humans so deeply connected to each other. She was no longer just a ruler searching for answers. She was a student, eager to learn and embrace something entirely new. For Dr. Harper, it was a journey he had never expected to embark on. He had spent his life studying biology, genetics, and human behavior, but teaching an alien princess about the very core of what made humans. Human was something he hadn't prepared for. He had thought his work was done when it came to explaining biology. But now he found himself delving into the more complex realm of emotions, relationships, and human vulnerability. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. The princess, despite her intellectual brilliance, struggled to grasp the subtlety of human emotions. Her people, the Elvenar, had always viewed emotions as a hindrance to their superiority. To embrace them was to challenge centuries of cultural belief. Yet she persisted, determined to change the very fabric of her society. One afternoon, as they sat in a quiet room aboard the space station, Dr. Harper noticed a change in the princess. Her usual calm demeanor seemed to hold an underlying restlessness. She had been spending hours reading human literature, observing interactions between humans on the station, and even attempting to interact with others in ways she had never done before. "I think I'm starting to understand," she said softly, her eyes focused on a book in her hands. "But it's so much more complicated than I ever imagined." Dr. Harper nodded, encouraging her to continue. "It's not easy. Emotions, connections, these things can't be explained in a single lesson. They have to be felt, experienced. It's not just about understanding the science. It's about allowing yourself to feel." The princess closed the book and looked at him. "I've been observing humans. I see the way they interact, the way they care for one another. But there's something more. When they fight, when they struggle, it's as though they are driven by something deeper, something that makes them stronger, even in their weakest moments." Dr. Harper smiled. "That's what makes us human. Even in our darkest times, we find strength in each other. Our emotions are the glue that holds us together. They motivate us to keep going, to fight for those we love." The princess looked out the window, her gaze lost in the stars. "I have been taught my whole life that my people do not need such bonds. We are strong because we rely on our abilities, our power. But now, I see how fragile that strength is. Without the emotional bonds you speak of, we are alone, isolated, even from each other." The weight of her words hung in the air. She was beginning to understand that emotional connection wasn't a weakness, it was a power that could unite her people, heal old wounds, and bring them closer together in ways they had never experienced. "I want to change that," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I want to bring this strength to my people. I want them to understand what I am beginning to learn, to understand that emotions are not to be feared, but to be embraced." Dr. Harper watched as the princess's determination grew. She was no longer just a ruler seeking answers for herself. She was a leader, committed to transforming the very core of her society. He could see it in her eyes, the spark of hope that had ignited, the vision of a future where her people were united not only by their strength, but by their ability to love, to care, and to feel. But as much as he wanted to help her, Dr. Harper knew it wouldn't be easy. The Elvenar had always been a proud species, resistant to change. There would be opposition. There always was when a species tried to break free from the old ways. and the princess would have to be strong enough to face that resistance and lead her people through it. Over the next few weeks, the princess took her first steps toward this new understanding. She began to interact more with the humans on the space station, engaging in conversations and observing their social dynamics. She asked Dr. Harper to help her understand human relationships from a deeper perspective, beyond just the biological aspect. She visited human families, watched them interact, and even participated in small gatherings. It was a slow process, but with each interaction, she learned more. She saw how humans found strength and vulnerability, how they supported each other through difficult times, and how the bonds they formed could transcend any obstacle. One evening, after spending hours with the family, the princess returned to Dr. Harper's lab, her face filled with wonder. "I never realized how deep human connections run," she said, her voice full of awe. "I watched a mother comfort her child, and I felt something I can't explain. It wasn't just sympathy. It was love. Real love. It was so powerful, so pure. I want to understand that feeling. I want my people to experience that." Dr. Harper looked at her, a sense of pride swelling within him. "You're on the right path. Understanding love, compassion, and vulnerability isn't something that can be forced. It has to come from within. But you're beginning to see it. And that's the first step." The princess smiled, a quiet determination in her eyes. "I will show my people that this is not a weakness. I will prove that embracing emotions will make us stronger, not weaker." In the days that followed, the princess began to share what she had learned with the leaders of her people. At first, they were resistant, skeptical of the idea that emotional bonds could somehow elevate them. But the princess, with Dr. Harper's guidance, presented her case with passion and conviction. She spoke not just of biology, but of the future of her people, of the unity they could achieve by embracing the power of connection. It was a difficult road, one filled with doubts and struggles, but the princess was undeterred. She had made her decision, and she would do everything in her power to bring her people into a new age. An age where love, connection, and vulnerability were not weaknesses but sources of strength. As the weeks passed, the princess became more determined to teach her people the importance of emotional bonds. With Dr. Harper's help, she began to put her plan into action. The human scientist had been both a guide and a confidant, someone who could explain the intricacies of human emotion. Yet he also offered practical advice on how to make this transformation happen. Together, they began preparing for a series of cultural exchanges, a way for the princess to share her newfound understanding of emotions with her people. The first step was to convince the Council of Elders, the leaders of her people, to hold a series of meetings where they would discuss the concept of emotional connection. The princess knew it wouldn't be easy. After all, emotions had always been viewed as a weakness in Elvenar culture, but she believed it was a necessary step. And with Dr. Harper's encouragement, she began to speak to the council, explaining what she had learned and how it could benefit their society. At first, the council was skeptical. They listened in silence as the princess spoke passionately about the power of emotional bonds, the strength that came from love, trust, and vulnerability. The concept of humans finding strength through connection was foreign to them, and many of the council members dismissed it as naive, something only a fragile species would rely on. But the princess was unwavering. She showed them examples of humans who had come together to overcome impossible odds, proving that their emotional bonds were not weaknesses, but sources of immense strength. However, not all members of the council were so easily convinced. Some, particularly the older members, were openly hostile to the idea. They believed that the princess was abandoning their heritage, rejecting the very values that had made their species strong for centuries. They saw this as a dangerous path, one that would lead to the downfall of their society. The princess, however, was determined. She continued to meet with the council, slowly winning over the younger generation with her passion and the undeniable logic behind her argument. As she spoke of the power of human love, the importance of empathy, and the necessity of forming strong emotional bonds, she began to see a shift in the atmosphere. Some of the council members who had been skeptical started to ask questions, showing genuine interest in the idea. It wasn't just an abstract concept anymore. It was becoming real. Meanwhile, Dr. Harper had been observing from the sidelines, offering his own insights when needed. He had never imagined that his work with human biology would lead him to this point, where he would be helping an entire alien species rethink the foundations of their society. It was a humbling experience, but it was also thrilling. The idea that humanity's emotional connections could help another species evolve in ways they had never thought possible was nothing short of revolutionary. But just as the princess began to see the first signs of success, an unexpected consequence arose. Some of the council members who had resisted the idea of embracing emotions began to push back in more aggressive ways. They feared the changes the princess was advocating for, and they believed that this new way of thinking would weaken their people. They began to spread rumors, telling the public that the princess's ideas were dangerous and that her attempts to change the culture would lead to chaos. The princess, seeing the growing opposition, realized that this was not going to be an easy road. Her people were divided. The younger generation, those who had grown up with a different view of the world, were more open to change. But the older generation, with their deeply ingrained beliefs, were resistant to the very idea of emotional vulnerability. The princess knew that if she didn't act quickly, the movement could lose momentum. With Dr. Harper's help, she decided to take a bold step. She organized a public gathering, where she would speak to the people directly, without the interference of the council. She invited Dr. Harper to be by her side, knowing that his presence would lend credibility to her message. The gathering was to be held in the heart of the capital city, where the council members had the most influence. It would be a chance for the princess to speak openly, to show her people the power of emotional connection, and to convince them that embracing their emotions would not weaken them. It would make them stronger. The day of the gathering arrived, and the crowd that had gathered was larger than the princess had anticipated. The streets were filled with curious onlookers, some eager to hear what the princess had to say, while others were more skeptical. As she stood before them, with Dr. Harper beside her, the princess felt both nervous and determined. This was her moment to change the future of her people. The crowd grew silent as she began to speak. She told them of her journey, of the lessons she had learned from humans, and of the power that emotional bonds could bring. She spoke of the strength that came from love, trust, and vulnerability, explaining how these connections were what allowed humans to overcome their struggles and build strong, united communities. She told them that the future of her people depended on their ability to embrace these emotions, to form real, lasting connections with one another. For a moment, the princess thought she saw doubt in the faces of the crowd. But then, something unexpected happened. A few of the younger members of the crowd stepped forward, sharing their own stories of how they had formed emotional bonds with others, how those bonds had given them strength during difficult times. Slowly, the crowd began to change. The skepticism that had once filled the air was replaced by curiosity, and for the first time, the princess saw hope in the eyes of her people. But just as things were beginning to shift, a small group of elders, led by a powerful council member who had been vehemently opposed to the princess's ideas, stepped forward. The air became tense as the elder spoke out, challenging the princess in front of the crowd. He warned that her ideas were dangerous and that they would lead to the downfall of the Elvenar. His words were sharp and filled with fear, and for a moment, the princess felt the weight of the opposition. But she didn't back down. With Dr. Harper's support, she addressed the crowd, speaking calmly and with conviction. "We have the power to change," she said, her voice steady. "We have the power to grow stronger, to build a future based on love and unity. And that future starts today." The battle was far from over. But in that moment, the princess knew she had taken the first step toward transforming her people. She had started a conversation, one that would change the course of their future forever. The following weeks were filled with a sense of tension and hope. The princess had taken a bold step in speaking publicly, and though there was still resistance, there was also a growing support for the changes she was advocating. The gathering had sparked something within the younger members of Elvenar society, something that felt like the beginning of a transformation. But it wasn't an easy path, and there was still much work to be done. Dr. Harper, who had been by her side throughout this journey, could see the weight of the responsibility pressing down on the princess. She had become the symbol of change, and with that came both admiration and doubt. But he also saw the spark of determination in her eyes, the same spark that had led her to seek understanding of human emotions in the first place. She was a leader, and she was ready to fight for the future of her people. The princess knew she had to continue her efforts, not just with the council, but with her people. She started organizing small cultural exchanges, inviting human families to meet with Elvenar families, to show them how emotional bonds worked in practice. The idea was simple: allow her people to see firsthand the strength that came from deep, meaningful relationships. At first, many of the Elvenar were hesitant. They had been taught for centuries that emotions were unnecessary, that they could be controlled, and should not interfere with their lives. But the princess was patient. She watched as families began to interact, seeing the subtle changes in behavior as the humans opened up to the Elvenar, sharing stories of love, loss, and connection. One evening, a human family, Dr. Harper's family, was invited to participate in one of these cultural exchanges. The family was excited, but they also knew it would be challenging. The Elvenar, after all, had always been distant, especially when it came to emotional expressions. But they were willing to help the princess in her efforts. As the Elvenar and humans gathered in a large hall, the atmosphere was thick with uncertainty. The humans were warm and open, smiling and speaking freely about their lives. They shared stories about their children, their struggles, and their triumphs. The Elvenar, though, stood back at first, observing, unsure of how to respond. But as the evening wore on, something unexpected happened. One of the Elvenar women, a young mother, began to speak. At first, her words were hesitant, as if she were unsure how to express herself. But the more she listened to the humans, the more she seemed to understand. She spoke about her own family, about the bonds she had with her child, and how she had always thought those bonds were simply a necessity, something that kept her people alive. But now, as she watched the humans interact, something inside her shifted. "I never thought love was something we could feel," she admitted, her voice shaky. "I always believed it was a weakness. But now, I see that it is not weakness. It is strength. I want to feel that strength, to understand it." The room fell silent for a moment, and then one of the human children, a little girl, approached the Elvenar woman. The child, with a smile that radiated innocence, took the woman's hand and said, "I love my family. I love them very much. It makes me strong." The words were simple, but they were profound. The Elvenar woman looked down at the child's hand in hers, a quiet realization dawning upon her. She had spent so much of her life guarding her emotions, keeping them locked away, but now she understood. Love wasn't just a feeling. It was something that could give her the strength to face anything, to protect the people she cared about. As the evening continued, more Elvenar began to open up. They shared their own stories, their own fears, and their own desires to feel the emotional connections that the humans spoke of so freely. The princess watched with pride as her people slowly started to embrace what she had been teaching them. They weren't there yet, but they were on the right path. The cultural exchange was a success, but the princess knew that it was just the beginning. There were still many obstacles to overcome. The elders, the leaders who had once been so resistant to change, were still not fully convinced. They continued to speak out against the idea of embracing emotions, fearing it would make the Elvenar weaker. They argued that it would lead to chaos, that the Elvenar would lose their superiority if they allowed emotions to guide them. But the princess was undeterred. She knew the power of human connection now, and she believed that the Elvenar would see it too. She had made it her mission to show them that emotions didn't make a species weak. They made a species stronger. Love, empathy, and connection were the very things that held humanity together through the hardest times. And she was determined to bring that strength to her people. One evening, as the princess walked through the halls of the palace, lost in thought, Dr. Harper caught up with her. He had been observing the cultural exchange from the sidelines, and he could see the change in the princess. She was more confident, more sure of her mission than ever before. "Do you think they're ready?" he asked quietly. The princess paused, looking out at the stars. "I think they are," she said softly. "But it will take time. Change never comes easily, especially when it challenges everything a society has believed for centuries. But I see it now. I see the way they're beginning to change. They're beginning to understand." Dr. Harper smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You've done something incredible. You've sparked a revolution, not just in their minds, but in their hearts." The princess smiled back, her gaze steady and filled with hope. "It's just the beginning, Dr. Harper. We have a long road ahead of us, but we're on the right path. And together, we will change the future of my people." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change for the Elvenar. The princess's bold steps toward fostering emotional connections within her society had begun to show real results. Though the road was still rocky, the shift in her people's attitudes was undeniable. More and more, Elvenar families were beginning to embrace the concepts of love, trust, and vulnerability, and the young ones were especially eager to learn and adapt. They saw in the humans the very strength the princess had described, a strength born not from power, but from the deep emotional bonds that united them. The princess had become a beacon of hope for her people. She was no longer just a ruler. She was a leader on a mission to redefine the future of her species. However, despite the progress, there remained a strong resistance from the older members of the council. These elders had been raised to believe that emotions were a weakness, something to be controlled or even suppressed. They had seen the Elvenar thrive for centuries without the need for emotional connections, and they believed the princess's new path would lead to their downfall. But the princess knew this was not the way forward. Her people had to evolve, and it would take time. She had prepared herself for the pushback, understanding that change, especially one this profound, would not come without resistance. Still, her resolve was unshaken. She continued to meet with the council, using her newfound knowledge to slowly win them over, showing them the power that emotions could have, not just on individuals, but on an entire society. One evening, as the council gathered for a meeting, the princess took a deep breath before stepping into the room. The air was thick with anticipation, and Dr. Harper, who had accompanied her, could sense the tension. This meeting would be pivotal. It was her chance to solidify the cultural changes she had been fighting for and to secure the future of her people. As she entered, the council members turned to face her, their expressions stern. The princess stood tall, her eyes filled with the determination that had carried her this far. "I have spoken to you many times about the importance of emotional bonds," she began, her voice steady and strong. "I have shown you the strength that comes from love, from vulnerability, from connection. But tonight, I am asking you to see beyond your fears, beyond the beliefs that have held us for so long." One of the older council members, a man known for his unyielding stance on tradition, stood up. His voice was filled with skepticism. "Princess, you speak of love and bonds as though they are the answer to all our problems. But what about our strength? What about the power that has made us the leaders of the galaxy? Are you asking us to throw that away?" The princess met his gaze with calm determination. "No, I am not asking you to throw anything away. I am asking you to see that strength can come from more than just power. It can come from unity, from working together, from caring for each other. If we are to survive as a species, we must adapt. We must learn to connect, not just with our own kind, but with others. The human species has shown us that." Another council member, a younger woman who had been more open to the idea of change, spoke up. But Your Highness, how do we know that this path will lead to success? How do we know that emotions won't make us weak, as the elders have warned? The princess paused, choosing her words carefully. I know that this path is uncertain. I know that change is difficult. But I also know this: we cannot remain stagnant. We cannot keep living the way we have lived for centuries. Emotions are not a weakness. They are a source of strength. And we can see that in humanity. She looked around the room, her gaze settling on the faces of the elders. I ask you all to open your hearts, to see the truth that I have come to understand. Our people are not weak because of our emotions. We are strong because of them. The room fell silent as the council members exchanged uneasy glances. There was still resistance, but there was also something else, something the princess had not seen before, the spark of understanding. She could see that some of the elders were beginning to shift in their thinking, their stone-hard expressions softening ever so slightly. Just then, a young Elvenar man who had been silent throughout the meeting stood up. His voice was quiet but filled with conviction. Princess, I was one of those who doubted. I feared that the changes you speak of would lead us astray. But now, after seeing how love has transformed the humans, how it has bound them together in ways that we cannot ignore, I believe we need this. The princess's heart swelled with pride as she saw the first true signs of change among her people. The young man's words seemed to break through the walls of resistance. Slowly, other council members began to speak up, expressing their willingness to consider the princess's vision. As the meeting came to an end, the princess felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was not a complete victory. There was still much work to be done. But it was a step in the right direction. Her people were beginning to understand that emotional connection was not a weakness, but a key to their survival, a source of power that could propel them forward. Outside the meeting hall, Dr. Harper caught up with the princess. You did it, he said with a smile. They're starting to listen. The princess nodded, her eyes filled with both hope and uncertainty. It's not over yet, but it's a start. The road ahead will be long, and there will be challenges. But I know this is the right path, and we will walk it together. As they left the council chambers, the princess couldn't help but feel a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. She had led her people to the brink of change, and though the future was still uncertain, she knew that they were now united by something stronger than just power. They were united by the emotional bonds that had always been part of humanity, and now, perhaps, they would be part of the Elvenar as well.